Alright, what's up guys? Johnny here, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about FlightOne and specifically sim mode. Now, I'm sure you guys have been seeing all the hype lately about FlightOne. You're seeing it all over Facebook, just everyone talking about FlightOne sim mode. The new hotness sim mode is lit, just you're seeing it everywhere. Now, usually I can kind of phase those things out. Maybe it's some guys who are sponsored pilots or something like that, just trying to, drive that hype train, drive that hype. But there was one video that got to me in particular, and that was the one put out by Cannonball. Basically, he went and he was flying with Nurk. Nurk, why don't you go ahead and fly my FlightOne quad, see if you like it. Nurk flies it and just immediately has better results, faster lap times, and he looks absolutely confused in that video. When I saw that, I was like, wow, you know what? I trust Nurk's flying. I know he's a real consistent pilot. To make a 3-second difference on 22, 20-second laps, that's a really, really big difference. I have to try this for myself. I have to see if I can get similar kind of results. So right away after I saw that video, I ordered myself a Spark 32 ESC and a millivolt OSD flight controller. I want what's considered the best of the best FlightOne stuff. Let's get the latest version of FlightOne on there. Let's load up sim mode. Let's try it out and see if it's as legit as people seem to be saying it is. Anyway, when I got things in, the first thing I noticed is when I took that Spark 32 ESC out, that thing is big, heavy, and feels high quality. I gotta tell you, just based on the way it feels alone, I'm guessing that thing's gonna last a long time. I did put it on the scale. It actually comes in about 6 grams heavier than my current go-to ESC, which is the Hobbywing 6S G2 ESC. So that extra 6 grams, you can really feel it when you hold it there. I'm sure that's probably why it's rated for 50 amps. It can put through a lot more power than the Hobbywing can. Apparently the DRWing guys put that to the test and they really saw those results. But man, when you pull that thing out, you're like, you know what? I got my money's worth. The other thing I really learned through this process is if you buy products through FlightOne, the FlightOne ESC flight controllers, if you break one, which, people who follow me, they've seen I've broken, I think, 14 different 4-in-1 ESCs this year. So if you break one, you can actually get a new replacement, brand new, from FlightOne for 50% off. So just that peace of mind that FlightOne gives you, knowing that if you break something, you can get a replacement for 50%, that's really, really nice. For me personally, breaking 14 of these things, that would have saved me a boatload of money. Now, the millivolt OSD flight controller, you pull that thing out, it looks well engineered. Once you put the grommets in, that thing is just tiny. Everything goes into it by plugs. It's not really what I'm used to. Usually I'm used to soldering things on, but I figured, you know what, this might actually make it pretty easy. And when I put this thing together, it went together really, really easy for me. There was one connector, you know what, I'll use that for my Crossfire. There's another connector, I'll use that for my VTX. You know what, there's another connector that goes to the ESC. You're basically done. I guess there's one more connector that goes to your camera. Like, that's all there is to building this thing when you put your components in. So definitely probably the easiest I've ever had while building a quad. I don't find it much more difficult soldering the wires on, but that was actually pretty cool. The one thing that did kind of catch me off guard is that you have to do some soldering to set jumpers. Do you want the inverted or non-inverted? Do you want to do ESC telemetry or analog current? For me, I knew that for the Spark 32, you have to do ESC telemetry if you want to get that current sensing. So I soldered on, I want to get the current sensing with the ESC telemetry. Anyway, everything went together pretty slick. I then loaded up the FlightOne software to get that thing loaded. I went through the whole process once, and it was really, really simple. So I've never used FlightOne before, or I've never tried the configurator, I never even downloaded before. And I can definitely say that following their little wizard, the next, put thing like this, next, put thing like this, next, put thing, this, and spin it around and all that goodness. That process does work. It figured out the motors pretty well. It says, hey, spin, which way is this one going? Flip it around, which way is this one going? Flip it around. All your motors are all set. It gives you a lot of confidence. You have the basics set up pretty well by the time you get to the end of it. Now, as soon as I was done with that, I put it right into expert mode. I saw it in the corner, and pretty much everything in there, even though it's different than Betaflight, it's similar concept, so I felt pretty much at home. The thing that caught me by surprise, though, is I have seen online where there's a little drop down that says sim mode. I could not find that. So after that, I joined the FlightOne board. I found out, hey, how do I get sim mode? Turns out you have to download the beta software, the beta configurator, download that, run through the whole process again. Everything was set up pretty simple. I went to the recommended settings for racing, which is pretty much the defaults for everything. Put in my rates from Betaflight. It's real nice that they offer the Betaflight rates in there. It's what I'm already used to. At that point, I had a quad and I was ready to fly. Guys, really good process. I personally prefer the Betaflight configurator, but you know what? The first time I used Betaflight, I don't think it was quite as easy as the first time I used FlightOne, but then again, when the first time I used Betaflight, I was brand new to quads, so take that for what it's worth. But someone who's familiar with quads, like, I can just tell you, FlightOne is not intimidating. If you've never tried it, don't be intimidated. You won't be able to figure it out. It's actually pretty simple. So that got to the first time testing out this quad. Now, when I first powered it up, there's a few things I noticed. Okay? One, the screen, the OSD that I have all this garbage on the side. I didn't know what that was. I typed in my whole name, Johnny Fly, and yet only Johnny F would show up on the screen. Even though I'd set up to use ESC telemetry, I couldn't see the current values. Are showing the wrong values. I didn't know what was going on with that, but I said, you know what? That stuff's not going to bother me. What I care most is how does this thing fly? Alright, so we got set up in the field. I brought my FlightOne quad, I brought my Betaflight quad, and I wanted to see, would I see that same sort of result that Nurk was seeing? And when I put it to the track, what happened is first I tried the Betaflight. I was going pretty well. That particular day, the sun was getting pretty low. It was kind of hard to see the gates we had, but I felt okay with Betaflight. I then tried my FlightOne Build, and wouldn't you know it, I had almost similar results that what Nurk was seeing. I was a good second and a half faster right away with my FlightOne quad. Just as you're flying, just the stick inputs, it gives you a lot of confidence, and that's why I almost say it's like con flight. You have this extra level of confidence when you're flying with sim mode, where you point the sticks and it goes where you think it should be going. Now, I don't know what the difference is with Betaflight and FlightOne, how the translation of the sticks into how it's moving, but you notice it right away. It is not just BS hype nonsense. There's a real difference in the feel of this quad. So anyway, like, wow, am I going to like this thing too much? I hope not. I don't want to rebuild all my quads, but you know what? Let's just keep going back and forth, running Betaflight, running FlightOne, running Betaflight, running FlightOne. And following that methodology, within a few batteries, I was actually faster on my Betaflight quad than I was with my FlightOne quad. Now, the quads are not identical. If you look at this FlightOne quad, we talked about the stack. I'm using the same camera, but the key difference here is I'm actually using the 2205 Brother Hobby motors. And on my Betaflight quad, I was flying the 2207 Brother Hobby motors. Otherwise, they're the same setup. They're the same props and everything. So I think there is more top-end power in that other quad. And maybe that was accounting for some of the differences in why I was a little bit faster on that particular track. Didn't feel like I was pushing it completely hard. But I did notice, by the end of it, I was actually more comfortable in Betaflight than I was in FlightOne. So huge initial feeling of just, wow, I love this thing, to, you know what? I'm not sure I need it. Let's keep doing some more testing. Next time I got a chance to go into the field, again, I was doing the same thing. Just fly FlightOne, fly Betaflight, fly FlightOne, fly Betaflight. There's something that started to jump out to me, and that was that things were tracking really well with FlightOne. I can point, it goes exactly where I point. But I'm noticing that in hard maneuvers, in split S's, I get a little bit more prop wash, a little bit more jitters with my FlightOne build than I do with Betaflight, and that really caught me by surprise. I was actually expecting that to be one of the areas that was much better at FlightOne. Now, I don't know if there's something wrong with my build, the way I did it. There wasn't a whole lot of room to get my VTX in here, so I had to put it on the top. Maybe that's not in the ideal position. Usually I just place that right on top of my flight controller. I'm good to go. There wasn't room to do it here because of the 20x20 flight controller. Just throwing that out there. Maybe if I redid the build, cleaned it up a little bit, it could solve some of that. But just in all my flying, I've noticed just real hard maneuvers, it just gives that little bit of stutter. If you keep it smooth, it's real nice, but the little hard maneuvers, my Betaflight quad seems to do a little bit better with it. I started with multi-shot because I heard multi-shot's what works best with FlightOne. But I noticed that my current sensing wasn't working at this point. So as I looked it up, they said, well, for that particular ESC, you have to use the ESC telemetry. In order to use ESC telemetry, you have to use D-Shot. So I switch it over to D-Shot, I go into the configurator, I spin up the motors, everything spins fine. I figure I'm good to go. Go out to the field, go to take off, not a damn thing happens. I can't arm the quad, I can't fly, I can't do nothing. Alright, so what's up with this? Don't know, go back to multi-shot, fly around, it's absolutely great. So I don't worry about it this day, I go back and I check again, and I start looking online. And I do get some support from the FlightOne guys. I'm like, hey, why does this not work? Why does it not spin on D-Shot? I don't understand what could possibly be wrong. And I said, well, are you using the TX3, the one that's in the port for Crossfire? I was like, yeah, that's how you use Crossfire. Well, if you do that, then it disables the D-Shot because you use the same DMA address as D-Shot, so you can't use it. I said, what? What is this nonsense? So it turns out when I talked to other guys like Captain Vanover, they told me the way to do it is to only run a single cable for your Crossfire receiver. But as I understand it, when you do that, you're basically limited to S-Bus. I don't think you have that full CSRF, the two-way communication. So that seems like a really big letdown with this particular flight controller. Personally, for me, that means I probably should have gone with a full-size flight controller, but you know what? It is what it is. Just a really annoying thing that I never would have, guessed at. There's nothing stating that, hey, if you configure this way, the way the pins are, it's not going to work. That was kind of a disappointing experience. Anyway, I got that figured out. As we keep flying, I'm just, you know what? I'll deal with the wrong values for current. I'll just keep using multi-shot. It's flying so well anyway. Don't even worry about it. Anyway, you just watch as I go to the next time and the next time and the next time as I keep flying. The thing is, I really, really like the way this FlightOne quad flies. But always within a few batteries, I'm just as fast on Betaflight. If you look at my flight footage on FlightOne of my different test tracks I did, they look really good. I felt just super confident. It has good power even though they're 2205s. I switch over to my Betaflight quad, still has great power. The lines might not be quite as good, but it's really close. And I really like Betaflight. Another thing that really got to me is that in this particular build, I ended up using my Runcam Sparrow 2 and not the Runcam Racer. Usually I want to use Runcam Racers, but it turns out FlightOne doesn't support camera control, so there's no way to change the camera settings. And that's just not going to fly for me, so I got to use this thing with a little dongle. Not a big deal, just a little bit of an inconvenience. So anyway, I took this thing out and I flew it back to back to back to back. In the end, I actually tried running it on UTT-4. UTT-4 is a track where you're basically going full tilt the whole way, just back, 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 and you try to get the lowest time you can. So this was a case where these 2205s were really hurting me on that track. They could not keep up on UTT-4 with the 2207s. So I didn't fly it much, but what I did notice is just the very first battery, I think this is the second battery I flew on the track total, just those turns, those lines, they lined up so good. The confidence it gives you when flying fast is really, really cool. There's some sort of magic in here that I want to understand, that I want to see put in practice in Betaflight. And honestly, just everybody should be able to try it. It's super impressive in FlightOne. I don't know what it is besides its sim mode, but man, there's something to it. But anyway, without those motors, I switched over, I ran Betaflight. As I ran it through the day, I set the #1 time on UTT-4. Bottom line is, as I kept flying, I found myself wanting to work with Betaflight more and more, and I determined I'm not going to be moving forward with FlightOne. It's really cool, I love having one of them, but just these little nuances just really bother me in flying with it. The thing with D-Shot just drives me nuts. I ended up figuring out what the issue was with the OSD where it wasn't showing the right things. I had to upload the fonts. I don't know if it was the standard fonts are broken, but just using the same default fonts and uploading again, everything seemed to be fixed there. Just little nuances that really made me kind of annoyed flying FlightOne, but all FlightOne is it's quality hardware and just that flight feel is so good. So for me personally, what I'm going to say is that there is definitely some magic here. When you see others talking online, they're not BSing you. I mean, maybe they're BSing you a little bit, but they're not totally BSing you. There's magic to be had. It is really cool, but there is some issues with FlightOne that I really hope they're going to get figured out. I had issues getting my smart audio to work. I had issues getting my on-screen menu to work. Just the font issues with the OSD, the issues with D-Shot, just little things just drive you absolutely nuts. I feel like it should be a more polished product. I do really like the fact that the hardware has that warranty built in. And something to keep in mind is you can use a lot of this hardware with your Betaflight quads anyway. So definitely, if you're curious and trying out some of this hardware, give it a shot. Install FlightOne. If you don't like it, as long as you don't get the millivolt OSD like I did, you should be able to install Betaflight on if you don't like it, so there's not really much to lose. So anyway, guys, there's been so much hype and so much attention, just everything going on about FlightOne. I wanted to put it to the test. I wanted to share those thoughts with you guys. Hopefully you found this thing helpful, and as always, I'll catch y'all next time. Peace!